If we turn to the second stanza, we have then and again, and then we have feet and heat. And again, this is paired rhyme. And then bringing us closer to where we have got to last time, we've got paired rhyme on eyes and cries, and must and does. So you can see that we have a pattern developing. Okay, there is a clear pattern of rhyme in this poem. Okay, so we had finished up looking at this idea of the half-form ghost, and we're talking about the ambiguity there. At this particular point, we are still unclear as to whether or not we're talking about here something that's being witnessed in the UK, in rural England, as in the photographs developing, or if we are in this war-torn country watching the suffering of a human being. Okay? And that's where the ambiguity is. So at this point we still don't know where we actually are and what we are witnessing. So an important word, I think, when you think about this poem, particularly at this point, is this word ambiguity. And the ambiguity, the confusion if you like, comes from an unclear sense of setting. And that's deliberate on the writer's part. Okay? Deliberate. The ambiguity is created by being ambiguous about where we actually are and what we are actually witnessing. Now, why do that? Why be ambiguous? And the point is that a lot of this poem really is also about another significant and important word which I would expect to come across in your answers, is this word tension. It's about creating tension. It's about making you feel stressed, making you feel anxious, because you're unsure about what you're seeing. Is it just a photograph that's developing, or am I actually witnessing the suffering and potentially death of another human being? And that creates tension in itself. So it's not until we get the word choice on remembers that clarity starts to come. And because we then become aware of the fact that our photographer is remembering, so it's not until the word choice on remembers that we actually have some sense of clarity. Because at this point we realise that the photographer is in the present, recollecting the past, and therefore if he is in the present, remembering something else, then we know with a certain amount of certainty that he is back in rural England, and it's that word that actually helps us to clarify. So this clarifies. We know at this point that he is in rural England, he is remembering the scene in the photograph that he is currently developing. So what do we learn about it? What does this photograph add? What's the detail of it? Well, the cries is all we get, and then we get the delayed revelation about who's crying, why are they crying. And again, this is all about tension. So it's the man's wife who's crying. How he sought approval. From who? For what? Without words, to do what someone must. What? And how the blood stained into foreign dust. Okay, so it's about the specifics and the detail. And again, this is all about tension. Because in some ways, your imagination, your worst fears, are probably likely to be worse than the reality. And that's what they're playing on. That's what the writer's playing on, is your own fears, your own worst fears. So it's the not knowing that enables your imagination to answer the questions for you, and it's that tension and that fear of being proven right, that's where the tension comes from. And this poem is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. Because if you're going to remember it, if you're going to actually take anything from it, then she needs to make you feel something. And obviously, discomfort is quite a memorable emotion to use. So then again, obviously we've got the rhyme on must and dust. And again, that marks the fact that what has been described to us is a scene in a war-torn country. Now, in terms of word choice, you can think about blood, and that has connotations of suffering, death, pain, and then this word here, stained, which I think is also worth commenting on. Okay, so the idea that it's stained would suggest perhaps permanency. Okay, permanency. So the idea that it's actually stained into the dust. It would also suggest that what we're actually looking at is an established scene. So we've not just necessarily witnessed the death of the person has been dead for a period of time. Okay? But it's this idea of being permanent, significant and lasting. A memory that cannot be erased. Okay? So by this point in the poem, we're feeling stressed, we're feeling tense, there's been an element of confusion which has been resolved, and we come to the last and clearly significant stanza. And in some ways this is the climax to the poem, because the last line, the last 4 words of the poem are the climax that we have been working towards. Okay? So if you think about it in terms of Freytag's analysis of your emotional response to a text, that as the text progresses, your emotional response increases until you reach a climax. And the climax is the bit at the end. The emotion that we are experiencing is obviously stress, tension, fear. Any of those words you could use to describe it. What the photographer has in front of him is 100 agonies in black and white. Now clearly that's imagery. Some of you may prefer to use personification, but I'd be more comfortable saying that it's a metaphor. So the photographs are being compared to extreme pain, use of the word agonies. Obviously the similarity is the extent of the pain and the suffering. And this is emphasising, the reason why she does it is to emphasise that extent of what is actually being witnessed. Okay, so if you had a question that asked you about that image, that's the analysis that you need to be using. If you look at that, you can see the steps that I've asked to do when analysing imagery done for you. So we have these awful photographs containing something, which his editor will pick out 5 or 6. So we know that originally there are hundreds, and yet the editor is only going to pick 5 or 6. And that small number is being used to mark the idea of insignificance. So the idea that there are hundreds, and yet potentially we are only going to see a very small proportion of the reality. Okay, so we're only going to see a very small bit, a very small piece of reality. That's reinforced even further with the fact that we're only seeing a small number of these pictures, and they've actually been relegated to the Sunday supplement. They don't actually make the main newspaper. So again, this is all about suggesting, alliteration, but alliteration first of all on Sunday supplement. What's important about the sibilants here is, again, it's reinforcing this idea of insignificance. And that's reflecting the way that we view and understand these events. We then are told that the reader's eyeballs prick. We don't know with what and how. With tears. So we have enjouement, and that's a delay in expression of the emotion. I think you could also comment on prick. It has connotations of being short-lived. If you think about being pricked with a needle, the idea is that it's a short, sharp pain, it's not lasting, it's not enduring. It may cause discomfort after the event, but it's not this idea of a long suffering.